Hello friends, I'll be talking about Sir Gawain and the Green Knight today. It's a very important and a very well-known work uh, from medieval English literature. I hope you will enjoy reading it because it has a very entertaining story actually. Alright, let's begin. So there are a couple of things that I want to mention at the beginning. So the first thing that I want to talk about is that it's another anonymous work. We don't exactly know the poet, just like Beowulf. Well, this is actually a very common thing for medieval literature, not only in English medieval literature, but all around the world, because, as I have told you before, authorship was not considered very important in the Middle Ages. So what do I mean by that? I mean, people did not really care about putting their names on the works that they have produced, or people stole ideas from each other freely and nobody cared, because the thing is, most of the works during that period were actually oral literature, works of oral literature. So therefore, it was actually not really possible to determine who came up with the story first. So again, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is an anonymous work. We don't know who wrote it. We know when it was written. It was written in the 15th century in Middle English. So Middle English, as we have discussed in our first class, English language has passed through certain stages. The first stage was Old English. Old English is the language used in Beowulf. It's a Germanic language, I mean, which means that it is a sister. It's a sister language with German. So German, English, Norwegian, uh, Dutch. These are all sister languages. What does it mean? I mean, it means that there are similar vocabularies, similar grammar structures in all those languages. So Old English is similar to German, actually, modern German. Then we have Middle English. Well, Middle English is actually similar to French because in 1066, as you know, a very big event happened in English history. It was the Battle of Hastings, where the Duke of Normandy, William, the Duke of Normandy, William, conquered England and he became the English king. So he defeated the Anglo-Saxons. And Normandy is a place in France. And these people, the Normans, spoke French. So then the kings of England became French people. So of course they spoke in French, and French became the popular language in the court. Okay, so there were three, as I have mentioned in the previous weeks, there were three separate languages in England at that time. So the normal people, the regular people, spoke in English. The clergy, or the people of the church, like priests, for example, they spoke in Latin, and the nobility, like the kings, the dukes, the lords, they spoke in French. And Middle English is like a mixture of Anglo-Saxon English or Old English and French. Okay, so if you unless you are academically trained, you cannot understand Old English. Old English is a very different language than modern English. But if you speak French very well, if you speak modern French, I mean in 2020, 21, if you speak modern French, and if you speak English very well, if you speak both of these languages very well, you can understand written Middle English. Okay, you can read a text which is written in Middle English. Of course, you cannot speak it, but you can read and understand it if you speak French and English very well. This work is quite important in the literary history of England, in English literary history, because it contains elements from three important poetic genres. So those are Arthurian romance poetry, or sometimes it is called courtly love poetry. Arthurian refers to King Arthur. Okay, I will be discussing it in a couple of minutes. So Arthurian romance poetry, medieval alliterative poetry. Alliteration, as you remember from Beowulf, is the repetition of certain sounds within the same line. So its purpose is to make memorizing a poem easier. Okay. And the third one is epic poetry. So epic is another literary genre, which is a poem which is quite long and talks about heroic adventures of a hero. Okay, so Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is an example of those three separate and important poetic genres. Okay, let's talk about the poet. So as I have told you before, so the poet is not known. This is an anonymous work. What you see in this picture is a painting depicting an illustration, let's call it, not painting, but an illustration of a scene from another story. This illustration is not from Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. So this illustration is from The Pearl. The Pearl is another medieval poem, another less known poem, let's say, and people or critics think that the person who wrote Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is the same person as the poet who wrote The Pearl. Okay, so the same person wrote Sir Gawain and the Green Knight and The Pearl. That's why the poet is usually called in academic circles as the Gawain poet, or sometimes called the Pearl poet. All right. So this manuscript where we find Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is next to, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, the text of the poem is found in the same manuscript as three other poems. Those poems are Pearl, Patience, Purity, and Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. These four texts were found in the same manuscript. A manuscript is a collection, a handwritten book, let's say, a handwritten book. So it was composed, this poem was composed probably around the same time as Chaucer. Okay, so it's the 15th or at least late 14th centuries. And of course, it has been quite a lot of time since Beowulf's composition. I mean, Beowulf is quite old. It's very old compared to Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. So, all right. So there is another thing that that is worth mentioning, and it's that we have Chaucer, we have the Canterbury Tales, the text that you were supposed to read for last week, in translations. Okay, what do I mean by translation? So both of these poems, I mean Canterbury Tales and Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, are written in Middle English, but the language in the Canterbury Tales is easier. It's closer to modern English. So if you are able to, if you speak very good English, you can actually read the original text of the Canterbury Tales. But the text or the language used, the style used in Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is a little bit more difficult. That's why we usually turn to modern English translations when we want to read Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. All right. So let's talk about the text. So in this again, in this photo, you see the manuscript of the original manuscript of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And if you check the left-hand side page, you can see here the illustrations of the story. So you can see at the top, you can see 3 knights, or probably there are more knights on the other side. A group of knights, and there's a person who has a crown in the middle, in blue clothing, and he's holding a sword, and that is probably King Arthur. And then at the bottom we have, so these 3 people you see, they are sitting actually on a table, and that table is a round table. So King Arthur and his round table knights, that's how they were called, the Knights of the Round Table. So why was the table round? Because on a round table, nobody sits at the. I mean, on a round table, everybody is equal. Okay, in a rectangular table, somebody sits at the center position, and this person is usually, I mean, hierarchically, is the has the most authority. Okay, the king usually on a rectangular table, the king sits at the short end. Okay, and it signifies that this person is important. But on a round table, everybody is equal. You cannot understand who is the king. Okay, on a round table. Okay, at the bottom you see the Green Knight on his horse, the headless Green Knight, and you can see here Gawain holding a big axe in the photo, and on the right side you see the text. All right, so we can say that I can add that the poet was well educated. Well, how do we know that? Because from what we see from the text, we can understand that he was aware uh, of the literary fashion of the period. I mean, he knew about the epic genre. He knew about medieval alliterative verse. He knew about all these kinds of stories, the Arthurian legends. Okay, he knew about them. So therefore, we can say that he was well educated. He had read, or at least he was aware of all those different kinds of poetic genres. All right, so let's talk about medieval romance. So when I say romance, you probably think about romanticism or love, okay? But this is not about that. So a romance is not usually, I mean, it doesn't have to be about love. A romance is a French word, which means vernacular language. Vernacular means mother tongue. Okay, a medieval romance. I will be talking about that later. A medieval romance is a narrative poem. A narrative poem is a poem which tells a story. So it's not about feelings, but it's about a story. Think about a novel, for example. When you read a novel, you read a story. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. But think about this novel, and then suppose that it's written in poetic form, in poetry form. Okay, so a narrative poem. So there are larger than life characters. A larger than life character is improbable. is an improbable person. Okay, so somebody you rarely meet in your life. Okay, a very interesting person. So they have larger than life characters. So a hero sets on an adventure in a medieval romance, and he has to pass through certain challenges. For example, he has to fight a monster in one chapter, and in the next chapter he has to survive a storm while he is on a ship, and then in the next chapter he has to kill a dragon. Okay, and then in the next chapter he has to outsmart a witch, for example. So he has to survive a certain number of challenges, this hero. So there is love in medieval romances. There is love between a noble lady and the knight. Okay, but this love is usually not the kind of love that you are used to. And this is an interesting. It's like a platonic love. Okay, and it's called courtly love. I will also be talking about that later. There are exotic settings. So exotic means unfamiliar settings. So medieval romances do not take place in in usual places. Okay, they don't take place in just villages. Okay, in cities, they usually take place in black forests, or endless seas, interesting places, exotic places, unfamiliar, dangerous places. There are supernatural elements, of course, as you have read in Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, such as a green knight coming to the court and his head is cut off, but then he takes his head he takes his head up, and the head speaks, and so on and so forth. So there are supernatural elements in medieval romances. There is a plot. There is a plot element which is called mistaken identity. So there is usually, I mean, in medieval romances, you encounter hidden identities or mistaken identities, which means that a person usually changes his or her appearance. Okay, and he's thought that he's actually somebody else. So this is a stereotype of the medieval romance. All right, so Romance means French vernacular language of the Middle Ages. So we also call poetry written in this language as romance as well. And narratives about adventure and love are called romances. So romance is not only about love. All right, so the most common form of literature in medieval English literary history was the romance. So romances are long and they have different parts. They have verse parts and prose parts. They tell us about the lives and adventures, the life story of a noble hero. So romances are not about ordinary people. Romances are about noble people, people in high positions. Okay. Why is that? It's because romances or medieval literature was usually, not always, but usually composed for noble people. And noble people were the consumers of literature because ordinary people did not read. Okay, so therefore literature in the Middle Ages was usually, again, not always, but usually composed for noble people. So, and noble people are not interested in common people. Okay, that's why the adventures in the romances are about noble people. So this noble hero, usually sets on an adventure, takes his weapons, hops on his horse, and he sets forth on an adventure. But unlike Beowulf, so Beowulf was also a heroic story, just as well as the medieval romances. But unlike Beowulf, we have some different things as well, because, for example, the Romance heroes were also devoted to the church as well. Okay, so but we don't see that in Beowulf, for example. So Beowulf, the character, Beowulf, I mean the hero, not the story, but Beowulf, the character, did not really talk about the church, the religion, or anything. Okay, but a knight in the romances, in the knight in the romances, were usually devoted to religion and church as well, and the manners, the behavior of the romance hero is different than Beowulf, for example, than the Anglo-Saxon heroes, in that knights usually follow a code of conduct. So they have their principles, they have their rules, which are called chivalry. So chivalric code or chivalric rules, let's say, chivalric code is more gentle, than the heroic code. The heroic code is the code which we find in Anglo-Saxon literature, but chivalric code is found in Middle English literature. Okay, so the heroic code is usually ruthless. It's more about taking revenge, spilling blood, killing as many people as you can. But a knight in Middle English romances is a gentle person. He doesn't spill innocent people's blood. Okay, and he is kind to ladies, things like that. I will be talking about them later as well. In order to be a knight, you have to pass 3 stages. So in the first stage, you are called a page. A page, I mean, it's written just as the same as the pages of a book. Okay, page. A page is a young boy who is one step lower than the squire. He's basically a servant, okay, a young boy who does very basic works, and then you become a squire. When you are a squire, you are responsible for taking care of the knight. I mean, you take care of his horse, you take care of his weapons, and then you become a knight. Okay, and in order to be a knight, you have to make your vows. Okay, you have to pass through a ceremony. You have to make an oath. Okay, so I have told you about the courtly love. Let's talk about it in more detail. So courtly love is a highly conventionalized code of conduct for lovers during the Middle Ages. The courtly love is a platonic love. It's between a noble lady and the knight, and there is no sexual expectation in courtly love. So the knight falls in love with a beautiful lady, and he dedicates all his actions for this woman, and the woman the woman can even be married. Okay, it doesn't matter, because marriage in Middle Ages was not about love. Marriage in the Middle Ages was about power and money. Okay, you married your daughter to the son of the person who is the richest person in your town. Okay, that was the thing. Why? Because the thing about marriage in the Middle Ages was that when you married your child to another person, to the child of another person, your grandchildren are going to own both of your lands. Okay, so that's why marriage in the Middle Ages was about money and power. So, but then we have inside us this feeling called love, and love was conducted through courtly love. Again, courtly love is a literary invention. Okay, it was not a real life thing. Okay, we can only see courtly love in works of literature, so it was probably a fictional thing. So it's a platonic love. There is no sex. A knight falls in love with a young woman, but he loves him from far away. Okay, they don't really get together. He dedicates his actions, he dedicates his service to this woman. Okay. Code of chivalry. I've told that I was going to talk about this as well. So code of chivalry is a group of rules that the knight is supposed to follow. Again, the code of chivalry, just like the courtly love, is probably just a literary thing. Okay, it's probably just fictional. We don't know if real life knights during the Middle Ages followed these rules. Okay, so what are some of these rules? They need to fear God and church. So they need to serve their Lord. They need to protect the weak. Again, when we are reading these things, when we are learning about these things, just remember Beowulf, okay, and try to see how different the code of chivalry is from the heroic code of the Anglo-Saxon period. Okay, so to fear God and church, to serve the Lord, to protect the weak, to give aid to those who need, to give aid to the needy, to refrain from giving unjustified harm, to refuse money as a reward, to obey those placed in authority, to never lie, to respect the honor of women, never to refuse a challenge from an equal, never to turn the back upon a foe, which means you cannot escape. You should not escape, run away from an enemy. So let's talk about the legend of Arthur. I'm sure you have seen or you know a couple of things about the legend of King Arthur. So King Arthur, I mean, there are different versions of King Arthur. So by the time Sir Gawain and the Green Knight was written, the legend of King Arthur was told and retold by many poets. Okay, so that's why there were different kinds of stories about King Arthur. So King Arthur was probably not a real, let, how can I put this? So he was probably a real person, but his name probably was not Arthur. If you remember, on our first or second week, we talked about how the Anglo-Saxons came to Britain. So Anglo-Saxons were living in Scandinavia, and then they invaded Britain, and the native people living there were called the British people. Okay, so they pushed the British people, they defeated the British people, and they pushed them to other places in Britain. And King Arthur is actually not an English person, not an English character, but he's a British character. So he is a native person. He's a native of the British Isles. So, and he was fighting the Anglo-Saxons when they invaded Britain. So at the end, as we know from history, the British people, like the Celts, I mean, the Celtic people, are defeated by the Anglo-Saxons, and King Arthur dies as a result. So he was I mean, according to the legends, he was a great commander, and he dies at the end. He is defeated by the Anglo-Saxons. But the legend says that he is the once and future king. Okay, once and the future king. What does that mean? He was the king. I mean, once he was our king. In the past, he was our king. And he is our future king as well. So King Arthur is going to be resurrected at one point in the future. That's what the British people believed. That's what the Celtic people believed in the past. Okay, and because there are many different stories going on around this mythological, this semi-mythological figure, there are many other side characters as well in the stories, in different versions of the story, such as Sir Lancelot, Sir Gawain, Queen Guinevere, Merlin, Merlin the magician, of course, the Round Table, which I have just discussed, and Camelot. Camelot is the name of the city that Arthur and his Round Table knights were living in. Okay, as I've told you, there are different stories about King Arthur, and in all of those stories, some characters are included and some others are excluded. Okay. Uh, Yes, a historical Arthur. As I have just told you, there was maybe a historical Arthur, a real life Arthur, uh, but then he is dead. Okay, he lost the fight against the Anglo-Saxon people. But then, so if Arthur is the king of the defeated people, the Celts, how come we still remember him? How, I mean, why did the Anglo-Saxons not erase his memory? It's because they chose to embrace him as a part of English or British culture. Okay, so they said, I mean, after a certain period of time, after after the Anglo-Saxons permanently settled in Britain, they probably thought they probably thought themselves as the natives of this island as well. Okay, so they decided to consider King Arthur as a British, okay, as a British hero. We have our own stories from Scandinavia, such as Beowulf, and those people have their own stories, such as King Arthur from Britain, and all of these stories are a part of the British heritage. Okay, that's why they decided to embrace the legend of King Arthur. That they not want to erase it. Okay, so this story was written in the 15th century, and this thing, I mean, the historical King Arthur, if he ever lived, I mean, he lived in the 7th century, so it has been at least 700 years since the first King Arthur stories have emerged. But then, as I have just told you, there were many stories which were constantly created by different poets, and these stories were not equally popular or equally fashionable or equally uh, in a high position, in a well-regarded position. So some of those stories were actually not very good. But Sir Gawain, the poet of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, decided to write a good story. I mean, a story which has high literary qualities. It's not a story that everybody loved during its composition, but it was a story which uh, those of them who were knowledgeable in literature liked. Okay, so I mean, similarly, so the Arthurian legend, I mean, the Arthurian legend was beginning to be forgotten, or it started to change its shape into a bad way. And similarly, our story, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, tells of a similar situation. So there is decadence in Arthurian in Arthur's court in Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Decadence means corruption. Okay, I'm going to be talking about that later as well. So in the 14th century England, the aristocratic ideals were just words. Okay, so the codes of chivalry that I have just mentioned you, they were not really followed. They were probably not really followed, but the knights or the kings, they usually boasted about they praised themselves and they boasted about holding those codes of chivalry, but they were not following those rules. Okay, so they liked showing off through tournaments. Okay, or they founded chivalric orders. An order is it's like a club. Okay, a chivalric club. Let's call it chivalric orders. But then they were not genuinely following the codes of chivalry. So there is a similar situation in Sir Gawain and the Green Knight as well. I will be talking about that. Okay, so there are some elements which fit the romance genre. So Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is set in a remote place and in a remote time. It's a mixture of I mean, it has many elements of supernatural elements and miracles. The hero is superior to other men and his environment, and there's a testing plot. A testing plot is the best example for the testing plot in the story is, of course, the test given by the Green Knight. Okay, the Green Knight wants to test King Arthur and his round table knights. So that, and the test is that the beheading game. So the beheading game. So in the beheading game, Green Knight arrives in Camelot, and then he challenges Arthur to a game of exchanging a blow for a blow. I'm going to try to cut your head off, and then you are going to try to cut my head off, and then I am going to try to cut your head off. So this is the test. This is the game. So Arthur is, of course, is a very brave king, and he accepts the challenge. But then Gawain steps in. Why does Gawain step in? So he interrupts the test. There are some possibilities. So one of those possibilities is that Gawain is actually the least experienced of the knights, and he wants to prove himself. That's why he jumps in, because he wants to prove himself. The other theory is that, as Sir Gawain puts it in the story with his own words, Arthur is the king and he's a very important person, and this is a dangerous game, and I am the youngest one here. I am the most inexperienced one, and therefore if something is going to happen, if something bad is going to happen, it should happen to me. I mean, the kingdom will be safe even if I die. So then, as you have read the story, Gawain cuts the Green Knight's head, and then but the Green Knight doesn't die, and he picks his head up, and the head speaks, and he says that you have in 1 year and a day, you have to pay your debt. Okay, you have to. I'm going to collect my debt. So that's the beheading game. The quest. So 1 year later, Gawain leaves Arthur's court to find this Green Knight. We don't exactly know where he is, but he sets on a dangerous and difficult journey. Okay. So then he finds a strange place in the after he passes through certain trials in the story. He comes to a strange place, and in this there is a castle, and in this castle there is a knight and his lady. This place is called Hout Desert. Hout is probably not in your text. In your version, this name doesn't appear, but in the original version, because your text is shorter. Okay, but in the original long version of this story, the name is Hout Desert, and there's a lord and a lady. They're called Lord and Lady Bertulac, and each day, every day, or let's say for 3 days, Lord Bertulac goes out on a hunt, and he says that, and Sir Gawain stays at the castle with Lady Bertulac, and the Lord says that at the end of the day, when I'm back from hunting, I'm going to give you what I have acquired during the hunt. And in return, you are going to give me what you have acquired during the day. Okay, so this is another test that Sir Gawain has to pass. So in the first and in the second days, the lady tries to seduce Sir Gawain, but he resists. Okay, but on the third day, so Bertolac returns, and okay, by the way, in the first and second days, so the Lord, as I have told you, he goes on a hunt and he returns with some with game, okay, with game meat. So he gives what he has hunted to those animals to Gawain. But on the third day, after Bertolac comes back from hunting, uh, Gawain refuses to give him the belt or the girdle, as it says in the text, the girdle that Lady Bertolac has given him on the third day. Okay, so I mean, this is actually an interesting story, an interesting. But I'm really fast when I'm summarizing it, and I'm really skipping a lot of details. So you have to read the original text always, even though I'm recording a video to you. I'm trying to be really fast when I'm summarizing the text. So you have to read the original text in order to understand the story. So the girdle. So Sir Gawain hides the girdle. He does not give him back to Lord Bertolac, and that was the test. Okay, so Lord Bertolac says that I am the Green Knight, and you have failed my test because you lied to me. You did not give the girdle to me, and so this is how bad a knight you are. Okay, so you have failed. But then Gawain is really embarrassed and he apologizes. And then Green Knight says that this was just a test. I know you are a good person, or something similar. I know you're a good person. Consider yourself as having passed the test. So, and then at the end, Gawain returns to Camelot, but he keeps the girdle on his waist all the time to make him remember the shame that he experienced in Hout Desert. All right, so there is, as I have, this was basically the story. So as I have told you, this is an alliterative text, alliterative poem, sorry. And again, even though this was written down, I mean, we have the manuscript. It was also performed as well orally. Okay, so in order for the bards, the storyteller, the singing storytellers, to remember the story easily, it was written in an alliterative form. Okay, there are some things that are worth analyzing in this story. So why is the Green Knight green? So the Green Man, this that was usually about the story of the Green Man, the idea of the Green Man. So before they converted to Christianity, Celtic people were pagans, of course. They had their own version of paganism, of course. There are so paganism is not one single religion. Okay, there was Turkish paganism before Turks converted to Islam. There was Celtic paganism before they converted to Christianity. There was Germanic paganism before the Anglo-Saxons converted to Christianity. And paganism is usually about worshipping the nature, okay, or worshipping the souls of the ancestors, or worshipping inanimate objects. Okay, so Green Man was one of those pagan stories which were believed by Celtic people before they converted to Christianity. So the Green Man is not an evil person, but he is also not a good person either. Okay, so he exists to test people. He exists to trick people. Okay, he exists to make people realize their mistakes. Okay, so Green Man is probably the archetype of the Green Knight. Okay. Okay, there are other symbols in the story as well. For example, uh, Gawain has a shield, and on the shield there's a star. Okay, but that's not called a star in the text. It's called a pentacle. And you see on this illustration again, Gawain's shield, and it has a star on it. Okay, so the five corners of the star represent five different things. Those are the five senses of Sir Gawain, which should be of the knight, of the ideal knight, let's say. Okay, the ideal knight should be faultless with regards to their senses. Their all five senses must be open all the time. So he has five fingers, which represents his strength. Okay, the five wounds of Christ. In the Christian belief, Christ was wounded 5 times during his crucifixion. The five joys, those are Annunciation, Nativity, Resurrection, Ascension, Assumption. So what are those things? Those are the 5 stages in Jesus's life. Annunciation is the announcement of Jesus' birth. Okay, before Christ was born, his birth was announced by wise people, according to Bible, according to the story in the Bible. Even before Jesus was born, his coming was known by some people, and they announced it. Nativity is his birth through immaculate conception. I mean, Mary was a virgin when he bore Jesus. Okay, that's nativity. Resurrection. Resurrection is after Jesus was crucified, he was resurrected. And then ascension. Ascension is Jesus's going up to the sky, to heavens. Okay, after he was resurrected, he was pulled to heaven, and then we have assumption. An assumption is Mary's, I mean, Virgin Mary's going up to heaven. Okay, so also he has 5 moral qualities: beneficence, beneficence, boundless, brotherly love, pure mind, pure manners, and compassion. So these are the stereotypical knightly qualities. Okay. Okay, so there is a little more that I want to say about green, about the color green. So green is an interesting color with regards to symbolism, because sometimes green is considered green is associated with, green is associated with, for example, good things such as nature. So it has a relaxing sense to it as well. But at the same time, for example, it's also usually the color of decay and toxicity. I mean, for example, when you are watching a cartoon, and if on this cartoon there is a poison in a bottle, this poison is usually green. Okay, so it's the stereotypical color for toxicity and decay and corruption as well. Okay, so just like the Green Knight. So Green Knight is neither good, neither bad. Sometimes he's a positive. He has positive qualities. Sometimes he has evil qualities. So Gawain also faced 5 challenges. This is also another striking thing in the story. Just like he had a star with 5 corners, he also faced 5 challenges. And those are, he had to voluntarily confront the Green Knight. I mean, it was the challenge was not directly directed towards him, but he jumped in, he volunteered, and then he had to strike his blow properly in the story. He had to keep his promise to meet the Green Knight in a year and a day. So he could have escaped. I mean, he could have ran away, but he did not. So this was one of the challenges. This was one of the moral or psychological challenges in the story. He had to keep his promise. He had to survive the journey to Green Chapel. He had a difficult journey when he went to, as he traveled to the Green Chapel to Hout Desert. And then finally, he had to resist the lady's temptations. He had to resist the seduction. Okay, so so what's the moral of the story? So we can say that Gawain has a fault. He has made a mistake by accepting the girdle, but at the same time, we can say that the acceptance of the girdle is not a fault, but the hiding of the girdle is the fault. Okay, uh, so, so he took the girdle from Lady Bertilac, but he did not show it, or he did not give it back to Lord Bertilac, and that's what made him fail the test at the end of the story. So girdle is like a women's belt, okay, worn during the Middle Ages. So it has also it also has a double meaning as well. I mean, in the story, we see that the lady was actually trying to seduce Sir Gawain, and the girdle is a piece of clothing written around the waist, and the waist connotes some sexuality. Okay, so think about the belt, or the red belt, the red girdle that sometimes we see around the waists of brides. Okay, in Turkish weddings, they tie red girdles around the waists of brides. Okay, and what's the significance of of this girdle, of this red girdle? It's metaphorically, it actually symbolizes virginity. Okay, uh, so the father ties the red girdle around the bride's waist, and he hands the bride to the groom, to the husband. Okay, and this red girdle is actually the symbol of virginity. So by accepting, or by let's say by giving her girdle to Gawain, the story might, the poet might be implying that Sir Gawain actually could not resist the seduction. So maybe they had sex in the story, but it's not written down. It's not told like this. But probably metaphorically they had sex. Okay, so that's also another symbolism that the Gawain poet is trying to give us. Okay, so what are the problems in Arthur's court? So there is too much emphasis on pleasure. At the beginning of the story, there is a feasting scene. So they are having a big and rich meal, a dinner. There's a festival at the beginning of the story. But as you remember from the Canterbury Tales, this was, I mean, when this story was written, uh, there were a lot of problems in the society. I mean, people were hungry. People, I mean, the Great Plague, the Black Death had just happened. So a lot of people were actually very hungry. And while the common people, and probably in the story, in Sorgaben and the Green Knight, probably when they were having this rich feast, the ordinary people were hungry. Okay, so there is a lot of emphasis on pleasure and worldly goods. So this is one of the mistakes of Arthur and his knights in the story. This is probably why, this is probably why the Green Knight is coming to the court, to Arthur's court, and that's why he wants to challenge them. So you tell us that you are knights, but then uh, you do not actually care about ordinary people. The ordinary people are hungry, but you are having this uh, lavish entertainment. Okay, so at the beginning of the story, we see that these knights are scared of the Green Knight, okay? And they are portrayed as almost like children, okay? So they need to be tested. Uh, these are these and the things that you see on the slide are some of the things that some of the things that are wrong about Arthur's court. All right, so the entrance and the depiction of the Green Knight is also a little bit interesting because he just jumps on his horse probably, and he just enters. He just easily enters King Arthur's court in Camelot. So this is the center of civilization according to the story, and he is just one person, and uh, he finds himself immediately in in Camelot in front of King Arthur. He could have killed all of them, okay, because they are so much, they are untested, okay. They are portrayed as weak, so they again the same thing. They seem like they are big knights, but then they are scared of him, and also it's very easy to reach them, okay. So talk about, let's summarize a couple of things. So these are probably the most important things in this story. So there are some elements which fit the romance genre, such as larger than life characters, a hero who undergoes a severe test, and then there is a noble lady. There's a love story between the noble lady and the knight. There is an exotic setting. The Hout Desert is an exotic place. There are supernatural elements in the story, and there is a mistaken identity. What is that? I mean, the mistaken identity is it belongs to Lord Bertilac. I mean, he at the end of the story, he comes up and says that I was the Green Knight all the time, okay, all that time. But then there are also some divergences from the romance genre as well. So the previous ones were the similarities. I mean, they were the things that fit the romance genre. But these are the things that which do not fit the romance genre. Calendar time, real places. I mean, calendar time by calendar time I mean it's Christmas. Okay, Christmas is a real time. And at the beginning of the story, we learn that these things are happening at the Christmas time. The first scene in the story, the feasting scene, is a Christmas celebration. So the hero is one of us. He's not really that much superior. I mean, he's not a perfect knight, just like neither of us is a perfect person. We all have our mistakes. Gawain also has his mistakes as well, and as a result, Gawain fails this test, just as we, I mean, the readers of this story could have failed, most probably would have failed this test, because we are all human and we all have our faults. In those kinds of ways, Gawain is actually similar to us. So that was the story, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And again, I feel the need to remind you that I'm not really, I mean, in some of those classes, I'm going to be focusing on the texts, but in some of them, such as this one, in some of those classes, I'm not going to be focusing on the texts. I'm just going to be giving you some background information. But it's your job and responsibility to read the texts on your own time, okay? In order to pass your exams, you have to know about the texts, because your questions uh, will be both about the background information and about the texts as well. All right, that's all I want to talk about. So see you next week.